The waiting room clock ticked past the 2-hour mark as Amira shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her back ached, and the baby inside her kicked with an energy that belied the exhaustion she felt. 8 months pregnant with her first child, she had been waiting at Downtown Medical Center far longer than her scheduled appointment time. "Mrs. Wilson?" a nurse finally called, not quite meeting her eyes. "Dr. Fleming will see you now." Amira gathered her purse and prenatal folder, following the nurse down a sterile hallway. The nurse took her vitals with mechanical efficiency, noting her elevated blood pressure without comment. "The doctor will be with you shortly," she said, closing the door behind her. Shortly turned into another 40 minutes. Amira's phone buzzed with a text from her husband, Anthony. "Surgery running late. We'll be there as soon as possible. Love you both." She smiled, despite her frustration. Anthony always referred to her and the baby as both, a small gesture that never failed to warm her heart. As a neurosurgeon at Memorial Hospital across town, he understood the unpredictability of medical schedules. But this wasn't an emergency surgery keeping her waiting. This was routine prenatal care. When the door finally swung open, Dr. Fleming barely glanced up from his tablet. He was older, with silver hair and glasses perched on his nose, wearing an expression of mild annoyance. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, making it sound like an accusation. "What seems to be the problem today?" "I've been having sharp pains on my right side and my blood pressure readings at home have been high," Amira explained, her hand resting protectively over her belly. "I'm also experiencing more swelling than usual in my ankles and hands." Dr. Fleming sighed heavily, as if she'd just described a hangnail rather than symptoms that had kept her awake with worry for 3 nights. "Pregnancy is uncomfortable," he said dismissively. "Especially for women with your build." Amira tensed. At 5'6", and with a pre-pregnancy weight that had always been within healthy ranges, the comment struck her as both unnecessary and inaccurate. "I understand pregnancy discomfort, Dr. Fleming. I've been reading about preeclampsia, and with my family history of high blood pressure—" "Ah," he interrupted, rolling his eyes. "Let me guess. You've been doing research online?" The air quotes he made around research stung, but Amira pressed on. "My mother had preeclampsia with both of her pregnancies, and my grandmother died in childbirth due to complications from—" "These internet diagnoses do nothing but create anxiety." Dr. Fleming cut her off again. "Your people tend to exaggerate medical issues. It's cultural, I suppose." The room seemed to grow colder. "My people?" Amira asked quietly. Dr. Fleming waved his hand dismissively. "You know what I mean. In your community, there's often a tendency to dramatize symptoms. Plus, with your dietary habits—" "I have a PhD in biochemistry," Amira interrupted, her voice steady despite the anger building inside her. "I'm a professor at the university. I understand the difference between internet myths and peer-reviewed medical research." The doctor's eyebrows rose slightly, the first sign he was actually listening to her. But instead of apologizing, he chuckled. "Well, then you should understand that pregnancy symptoms vary widely, and what you're experiencing is perfectly normal. Though I must say your lifestyle choices probably aren't helping." "My lifestyle choices?" Amira echoed, disbelief coloring her voice. "Well, yes. Studies show that women from certain backgrounds don't always make the best prenatal nutrition choices. Fast food, sugary drinks, these things affect the pregnancy, you know." Amira stared at him, speechless. She hadn't mentioned her diet once. Her meal plan had been meticulously crafted with her previous OB/GYN before the doctor relocated, and Amira was assigned to Dr. Fleming for her final trimester. "I follow a Mediterranean diet," she said finally. "Plenty of vegetables, lean proteins, whole grains. I haven't had fast food since college." Dr. Fleming looked unconvinced. "Well, regardless, what you're experiencing is normal 3rd trimester discomfort. Take some Tylenol if you need to, drink more water, and put your feet up." "You're not going to run any tests? Check my urine for protein? Monitor my blood pressure over the next few days?" Amira asked, thinking of the standard protocol for suspected preeclampsia she'd read about. The doctor sighed again, more dramatically this time. "Mrs. Wilson, I've been delivering babies for 30 years. I think I know when tests are necessary. You're being overly emotional, which is, again, very normal for pregnant women. Amira felt tears pricking at the corners of her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction of confirming his emotional diagnosis. "I'd like the test done anyway," she said firmly. "I have good insurance, and I'd rather be safe than sorry." Dr. Fleming's face hardened. "I decide what tests are medically necessary, not my patients. If you wanted a doctor who would indulge every anxious whim, perhaps you should have stayed in a clinic in your own neighborhood." The implication was clear, and it hit Amira like a physical blow. She'd chosen this medical center for its excellent reputation and state-of-the-art facilities, driving 40 minutes each way for her appointments. The suggestion that she belonged somewhere else, somewhere presumably less prestigious, solely because of her race, was unmistakable. "I chose this hospital because it's supposed to be the best," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "And it is," Dr. Fleming replied, standing up. "Which is why we don't waste resources on unnecessary testing. Now, I'll see you at your next scheduled appointment in 2 weeks, unless there's an actual emergency." He moved toward the door, clearly considering the appointment over, despite having spent less than 10 minutes with her, and having conducted no physical examination whatsoever. "Doctor," Amira called after him, desperation creeping into her voice. "The pain is real. It wakes me up at night. Sometimes it's hard to breathe." Dr. Fleming paused at the door, and for a moment Amira thought she might have gotten through to him. But when he turned, his expression was one of practiced patience, the kind reserved for difficult children. "Pregnancy is uncomfortable," he repeated slowly, as if she might not have understood the first time. "If you want comfort, I suggest a pregnancy massage at one of those spa places. I hear they're quite popular these days." With that, he was gone, leaving Amira alone in the examination room, still sitting on the paper-covered table, still in her hospital gown, and still completely unexamined. She placed both hands on her belly, feeling her baby's movements beneath her palms. "It's okay," she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was reassuring her child or herself. "Daddy will be here soon." Carefully, she got dressed, her movements mechanical as she tried to process what had just happened. Had she somehow misrepresented her symptoms? Had she been too assertive? Not assertive enough, no, she realized as she buttoned her maternity blouse. The problem wasn't her communication. It was that Dr. Fleming had decided who she was the moment. He walked in the room, and nothing she said after that had mattered. She gathered her things, fighting back tears. She wouldn't cry here. She would not give anyone the satisfaction of seeing her breakdown. She had almost reached the door when it swung open, and a nurse, different from the one before, entered with a blood pressure cuff. "Sorry for the delay, Mrs. Wilson," the nurse said kindly. "I need to get another reading before you go. Your numbers were a bit high earlier." Amira sat down again, extending her arm automatically. The nurse wrapped the cuff around her bicep and inflated it. The nurse said, frowning at the reading. "Still quite elevated. Did the doctor discuss this with you?" "He said it was normal," Amira replied flatly. The nurse's expression flickered with something, concern perhaps, or disagreement, before her professional mask slipped back into place. "Well, make sure to monitor it at home," she advised, making a note in the chart. "And call immediately if it goes above 140/90 or if your symptoms worsen." Amira nodded, grateful for this small act of genuine care. As she walked out to the reception area, she checked her phone again. Anthony had texted, "Just finished. On my way. 15 minutes." She sank into a chair in the waiting room, too drained to make the walk to the parking garage just yet. She needed a moment to collect herself before facing the world outside, and to decide exactly how much to tell her husband about what had just happened in that examination room. Anthony Wilson rushed through the hospital entrance, his stethoscope still hanging around his neck. The emergency surgery had taken longer than expected, a complicated brain aneurysm that required his full concentration for nearly 4 hours. Now, all he wanted was to be with his wife for her important prenatal appointment. The receptionist looked up as he approached the desk, slightly out of breath. "I'm looking for my wife, Amira Wilson. She had an appointment with Dr. Fleming at 2 o'clock. The The receptionist tapped at her keyboard. "Yes, it looks like she's been seen already," she said, not quite meeting his eyes. Anthony checked his watch, 3:45 p.m. "Is she still here? Let me check." The woman picked up a phone, spoke quietly, then nodded. "She's in the waiting area around the corner." Anthony thanked her and hurried in the direction indicated. He found Amira sitting alone, staring at her phone, a distant look in her eyes that immediately set off alarm bells in his mind. After 12 years together, he knew every expression, every subtle shift in her demeanor. "Hey, love," he said softly, sitting beside her. "I'm so sorry I'm late." Amira looked up, and the flash of relief in her eyes was quickly replaced by something else. Hesitation, perhaps, or reluctance. "It's okay. The surgery went well?" "Yes, the patient's stable," Anthony replied, taking her hand. "But never mind that. How did your appointment go? What did the doctor say about the pain?" Amira's eyes dropped to their joined hands. "He said it's normal pregnancy discomfort." Anthony waited for more, but nothing came. "And? Did he run any tests? Check your blood pressure? Did he do an ultrasound?" "No tests," Amira said flatly. He didn't think they were necessary. Something in her tone made Anthony frown. "What about your family history of preeclampsia? Did you tell him about that?" "I tried," she said, her voice barely audible. Anthony's frown deepened. He'd been a neurosurgeon for 8 years, and while obstetrics wasn't his specialty, he knew enough to understand that Amira's symptoms warranted investigation, especially given her family history. "Let me talk to him," he said, starting to rise. Amira's hand tightened around his. "He's gone already. His shift ended." "Then we'll speak to someone else," Anthony insisted. "This isn't right, Amira. You've been having significant pain, your blood pressure has been elevated at home, and you've got swelling that's gotten worse just in the past week." A nurse walked by, and Anthony flagged her down. "Excuse me, I'm Dr. Wilson. My wife just saw Dr. Fleming, but I'm concerned about her symptoms. Is there another OB on duty who could see her?" The nurse hesitated, glancing between them. "Dr. Fleming is the only OB/GYN on this floor right now, but I can page him if it's urgent." "It is," Anthony said firmly. "I'll see if he's still in the building," the nurse replied, moving to the nurse's station. Amira tugged gently on his sleeve. "Anthony, maybe we should just go home. I can call tomorrow and make an appointment with someone else." Anthony studied his wife's face. "What happened? In there, Amira, what did he say to you?" Amira shook her head slightly. "It doesn't matter." "It absolutely matters," Anthony countered, keeping his voice low. "If he dismissed your concerns or didn't provide proper care, that matters a great deal." Before Amira could respond, the nurse returned. "Dr. Fleming is still here. He'll come speak with you, but he says it will have to be quick as he has a meeting." Anthony nodded, thanking the nurse. As they waited, he noticed Amira's posture change. She sat straighter, almost bracing herself. It made his stomach clench, with worry. 5 minutes later, Dr. Fleming appeared, looking irritated at having been called back. He approached them with a clipboard in hand, his eyes on Anthony. "I understand you have questions about your wife's appointment?" he asked, not acknowledging Amira at all. Anthony stood, extending his hand. "Dr. Anthony Wilson. Yes, I'm concerned about my wife's symptoms, which I understand weren't addressed during her appointment." Dr. Fleming's demeanor shifted slightly as he took in Anthony's professional attire and the ID badge still clipped to his pocket. He shook Anthony's hand with a suddenly warmer smile. Dr. Wilson. From cardiology?" "Neurosurgery," Anthony corrected. "At Memorial." "Excellent, excellent," Dr. Fleming said, his tone now collegial as if they were chatting at a medical conference. "Well, I can assure you that I conducted a thorough examination and found nothing concerning. Just the usual third trimester discomforts." Anthony felt Amira tense beside him but kept his focus on Dr. Fleming. "Did you check her blood pressure?" "Of course," Dr. Fleming replied smoothly. "Standard procedure." "And what was the reading, Doctor?" Fleming glanced down at his clipboard. "Within normal parameters for a woman in her condition." "What was the exact number?" Anthony pressed. A flicker of annoyance crossed the doctor's face. 135/88. Slightly elevated but not concerning. Anthony knew that wasn't true. For a pregnant woman, those numbers were right on the borderline of hypertension and, combined with Amira's other symptoms, warranted further investigation. And her family history of preeclampsia? Did that factor into your assessment? Dr. Fleming's smile tightened. Family histories can be unreliable. Many people misunderstand medical terminology. My wife has a PhD in biochemistry, Anthony said calmly. I think she understands medical terminology quite well. For the first time, Dr. Fleming looked directly at Amira, reassessing her with new eyes. The surprise on his face was quickly masked, but not before both Amira and Anthony had seen it. I see, he said stiffly. Well, regardless, her symptoms don't indicate preeclampsia at this time. Did you test her urine for protein? Anthony asked, knowing this was a standard test for preeclampsia. I didn't deem it necessary based on my examination, Dr. Fleming replied, his voice taking on a defensive edge. And this examination, did it include palpating the area where she's experiencing pain? Measuring the edema in her extremities? Listening to fetal heart tones? Dr. Fleming's face reddened slightly. Dr. Wilson, I understand your concern as a husband, but I assure you that as an obstetrician with 30 years of experience, I'm asking as both a husband and a physician. Anthony interrupted, his voice still calm but firm. Standard protocol for a patient presenting with my wife's symptoms would include those basic examinations, as well as urinalysis and blood work to rule out preeclampsia, especially given her family history. A tense silence fell between them. Around them, the hospital continued its business, phones ringing, nurses chatting, patients being called. But in their small corner of the waiting area, it felt as if time had stopped. Perhaps, Dr. Fleming finally said, his jaw tight, we should continue this conversation in private. Anthony nodded. I think that's a good idea. Is there an examination room available? Dr. Fleming led them to a small consultation room off the main hallway. Once inside, with the door closed, his professional facade slipped further. Dr. Wilson, I understand your concern, but questioning my medical judgment in a public area is highly inappropriate. I apologize for the setting, Anthony said, but not for the questions. My wife came to you with specific symptoms that align with a potentially serious condition, one that runs in her family. Instead of conducting appropriate tests, you dismissed her concerns entirely. I made a medical judgment based on my examination, Dr. Fleming insisted. What examination? Amira spoke up finally, her voice quiet but clear. You didn't touch me once. You didn't check my swelling. You didn't listen to the baby's heartbeat. You spent less than 10 minutes with me, most of which was spent telling me I was being overly emotional and making comments about my community and lifestyle choices. Dr. Fleming's face darkened. Mrs. Wilson, perhaps you misunderstood. I understood perfectly, Amira cut in, her composure remarkable despite the slight tremor in her hands. When I told you about my symptoms, you said, your people tend to exaggerate medical issues. When I mentioned my education, you laughed. When I asked for tests, you suggested I should go to a clinic in my own neighborhood. Anthony felt a cold fury building inside him, but kept his expression neutral. Is this true, Dr. Fleming? She's twisting my words, the doctor said dismissively. Pregnant women often become emotional and— Please don't finish that sentence, Anthony interrupted, his voice dangerously quiet. My wife is not emotional. She's reporting symptoms that any competent physician would investigate, especially given her family history. Dr. Fleming drew himself up, affronted. I resent the implication that I'm not competent. I've delivered over 5,000 babies in my career. Then you know better, Anthony replied simply. You know that high blood pressure, swelling, and pain in a third trimester patient with a family history of preeclampsia warrants investigation, not dismissal. The doctor's eyes narrowed. What exactly are you suggesting, Dr. Wilson? I'm not suggesting anything. I'm stating clearly that my wife did not receive the standard of care that any patient deserves. and I'm asking now that you perform the appropriate tests or refer us to someone who will." Dr. Fleming looked between them, calculating his options. Finally, he said, "Fine, we can run some basic tests, but I want it noted that I'm doing this under protest and only to alleviate your concerns, which I still believe are unwarranted." "Noted," Anthony said calmly. "Shall we begin?" The consultation room felt smaller by the minute as Dr. Fleming, Amira, and Anthony stood in a tense triangle. The doctor's eyes darted between them, his earlier confidence visibly wavering. "Let me be clear," Anthony said, maintaining the same calm, measured tone he used in the operating room. "We're not asking for special treatment. We're asking for the standard care that should be provided to any patient with these symptoms." Dr. Fleming's jaw tightened. "Very well. Let me get a nurse to assist with the blood work and urinalysis." As the doctor stepped out, Amira let out a long breath. "I'm sorry," she whispered. Anthony turned to her, surprised. "For what?" "For not standing up for myself more. For needing you to step in." He took her hands, noticing again how swollen her fingers were around her wedding ring. "You have nothing to apologize for. This isn't about you not being assertive enough. It's about a doctor failing to do his job properly." The door opened and Dr. Fleming returned with a nurse, a kind-faced woman named Rita according to her badge. "Mrs. Wilson needs blood work and a urine sample," he instructed Rita, his tone clipped, "and prepare the ultrasound machine." Rita nodded, handing Amira a plastic cup for the urine sample. "The bathroom is just across the hall, dear. Take your time." While Amira was gone, Anthony maintained a professional demeanor, though his mind was racing with questions about how many other patients might have received similar treatment from this doctor. "You're at Memorial, you said?" Dr. Fleming asked, breaking the silence, clearly trying to establish a more collegial rapport. "Yes," Anthony replied simply, not taking the bait. "Fine neurosurgery department there. I know Dr. Patel quite well." "Dr. Patel is an excellent surgeon," Anthony agreed neutrally. The conversation stalled as Amira returned. Rita took the sample and then efficiently drew blood, labeling the vials and promising to rush them to the lab. "Now let's check that blood pressure again," Dr. Fleming said, reaching for the cuff. Anthony watched carefully as the doctor took the reading. The monitor displayed 142/90, significantly higher than what Dr. Fleming had claimed earlier, and definitely in the concerning range for a pregnant woman. Dr. Fleming murmured, frowning at the display. "A bit elevated from earlier." Anthony said nothing, but his raised eyebrow spoke volumes. "Let's do that ultrasound now," the doctor continued, gesturing for Amira to lie back on the examination table. As he prepared the machine, Anthony positioned himself where he could see the screen clearly. Though neurosurgery was his specialty, he had done rotations in obstetrics during his training and understood the basics of prenatal ultrasounds. The room filled with the rapid whooshing sound of their baby's heartbeat as Dr. Fleming moved the wand over Amira's belly. The sound normally brought tears of joy to their eyes, but today, tension hung in the air, dampening the moment. "Heart rate is good," Dr. Fleming noted, making measurements on the screen. "Amniotic fluid levels normal. Baby is in the correct position." Anthony watched as the doctor took measurements, noting that everything seemed to be within normal parameters. Their baby appeared healthy, which was a profound relief amidst the stress of the situation. "Now, about this pain you've been experiencing," Dr. Fleming said, turning to Amira with a suddenly more attentive manner. "Can you show me exactly where it's located?" Amira indicated her right side just below her ribs. Dr. Fleming pressed gently on the area, watching her face for reactions. "Any tenderness here? Or here?" he asked, moving his hands to different positions. "Yes, especially when you press there." Amira winced. Dr. Fleming nodded, making notes in her chart. His entire demeanor had shifted. Now he was thorough, attentive, professional. The change would have been comical if the situation weren't so serious. A knock at the door interrupted them. Rita entered with a tablet, showing Dr. Fleming the test results. His expression changed as he read the screen, a flicker of something, concern, perhaps or possibly embarrassment crossing his features. Mrs. Wilson, he said, looking up, your urinalysis shows elevated protein levels, and combined with your blood pressure readings and symptoms, I believe we need to consider the possibility of preeclampsia. Anthony felt a mixture of vindication and concern. He'd suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed brought both relief that they were finally being taken seriously and worry about what it meant for Amira and their baby. What's the treatment plan? He asked, medical training taking over. Dr. Fleming hesitated, glancing between them. Given these results, I recommend admission for observation and further testing. We'll need to monitor her blood pressure closely and possibly start medication to prevent seizures. Seizures? Amira echoed, fear edging into her voice. Anthony moved to her side, taking her hand. It's a precautionary measure, he explained gently. Untreated preeclampsia can lead to seizures, but we've caught this early. He turned to Dr. Fleming, his gaze steady. I assume you'll be consulting with the high-risk pregnancy team? The doctor nodded stiffly. Yes, I'll call Dr. Chen immediately. Good, Anthony said, and I'd like copies of all test results and the ultrasound images for our records. Of course, Dr. Fleming replied, a muscle twitching in his jaw. As the doctor stepped out to make arrangements for Amira's admission, Rita stayed behind to help her change into a hospital gown. You did the right thing, standing up for yourselves, Rita said quietly, adjusting the blood pressure cuff for another reading. Unfortunately, you're not the first. Anthony and Amira exchanged glances. Not the first what? Anthony asked. Rita checked over her shoulder to ensure they were alone. Not the first patient Dr. Fleming has, well, let's say underserved. Especially patients who look like you, Mrs. Wilson. You mean black patients, Amira said plainly. Rita nodded, her expression somber. Some of the nurses have noticed patterns, but it's hard to prove, and even harder, to report without risking our jobs. Has anyone tried? Anthony asked. A few times, Rita admitted. But nothing ever comes of it. He's been here forever, has connections on the board, brings in wealthy patients. She shrugged helplessly. The system protects its own. The door opened before they could respond, and Dr. Fleming returned with another doctor, a woman in her late 40s with a calm, authoritative presence. Mr. and Mrs. Wilson, this is Dr. Chen, our specialist in maternal fetal medicine. Dr. Fleming introduced her. Dr. Chen shook their hands warmly. I've reviewed your preliminary results, Mrs. Wilson, and I agree that admission for observation is the prudent course of action. I'd like to run a few additional tests and monitor you overnight at minimum. Anthony felt Amira relax slightly at Dr. Chen's straightforward, respectful approach. Thank you, doctor, Amira said. Will this affect our baby? That's our primary concern right now, Dr. Chen assured her. The good news is that you're at 32 weeks, which means your baby is well developed. If we need to deliver early, the prognosis is very good, but our goal is to manage your condition and keep that baby cooking a bit longer, if we can safely do so. Her use of the casual phrase, keep that baby cooking, broke some of the tension in the room, earning a small smile from Amira. I'll handle Mrs. Wilson's care from here, Dr. Chen told Dr. Fleming, her tone professional but with an undercurrent that suggested she understood more than she was saying. Dr. Fleming nodded curtly. I'll update her chart with today's findings. Mr. Wilson, Mrs. Wilson, he said with a stiff nod to each of them. I wish you the best. As he turned to leave, Anthony spoke up. Dr. Fleming, a moment, please. The doctor paused, his hand on the doorknob. Anthony stepped closer, lowering his voice. I want to be very clear about something. What happened today, the dismissal of my wife's symptoms, the unprofessional comments, the inadequate care, it's not something I can simply let go. Dr. Fleming's face hardened. Are you threatening me, Dr. Wilson? Not at all, Anthony replied evenly. I'm informing you that I'll be filing a formal complaint with the hospital administration and the medical board, not out of spite, but because accountability matters in our profession. You'll find that process quite frustrating, Dr. Fleming said, a hint of smugness returning to his tone. I've been practicing medicine since before you were born, Dr. Wilson. My record speaks for itself. Does it? Anthony asked quietly. Because I wonder what that record would show if someone actually looked at patient outcomes sorted by demographics, or reviewed complaints that may have been dismissed, or interviewed nurses who've observed patterns of behavior. The smugness faltered, replaced by something closer to unease. You should know, Anthony continued, that I serve on Memorial's ethics committee and have some experience with these reviews. I understand how systems work to protect certain individuals at the expense of patients, and I know exactly how to navigate those systems to ensure accountability. Dr. Fleming's complexion had paled slightly. You're making a mistake, he said, but the words lacked conviction. No, Anthony replied firmly. The mistake was thinking that your position and privilege would shield you from the consequences of providing substandard care based on personal bias. That ends today. A heavy silence fell between them. Finally, Dr. Fleming turned without another word and left the room. Dr. Chen, who had been reviewing Amira's chart during this exchange, looked up with a slight smile. Well, she said, let's get you settled in a room, Mrs. Wilson. We have some work to do to keep you and your baby healthy. As they prepared to move Amira to the maternity ward, Rita touched Anthony's arm gently. Thank you, she whispered. Some of us have been waiting a long time for someone to stand up to him like that. Anthony nodded, understanding the weight of her words. This wasn't just about Amira's care anymore. It was about a system that had allowed prejudice to compromise patient safety for far too long. As he helped Amira into the wheelchair that would transport her upstairs, she squeezed his hand. You were amazing, she murmured. I just did what anyone should do when faced with injustice, he replied. The question now is, what happens next? That question lingered in the air as they made their way to the elevator, uncertain of what the coming days would bring, but committed to ensuring that what had happened to Amira wouldn't happen to anyone else. The maternity ward was quieter than the bustling clinic below. Soft lighting and pastel colors created a more soothing environment. As Rita wheeled Amira into a private room, Anthony walking alongside them. The charge nurse will be in shortly. To get you settled, Rita said, helping Amira onto the bed. Dr. Chen ordered continuous monitoring, so we'll hook you up to keep an eye on your blood pressure and the baby's heart rate. Thank you for everything, Amira said, genuine gratitude in her voice. Rita smiled warmly. Just doing my job, honey, though. She hesitated, lowering her voice. What happened downstairs? That's been going on too long. If you do file that complaint, and if you need a statement from staff, well, you'd be surprised how many of us would be willing to speak up with the right person leading the charge. With that, she gave Amira's hand a gentle squeeze and left the room. Anthony helped Amira get comfortable, adjusting pillows behind her back. How are you feeling? He asked, concern etched on his face. Physically? The pain is still there, but knowing someone's finally taking it seriously helps, Amira admitted. Emotionally? I'm angry, hurt, and honestly, a little ashamed. Ashamed? Why would you feel ashamed? Amira sighed, staring at her swollen hands. Because for a while there I started to believe him. Started to think maybe I was being dramatic, overreacting, imagining things. When someone with authority dismisses you so completely, you start to doubt yourself. Anthony sat on the edge of the bed, taking her hand. That's exactly how gaslighting works. It's not your fault. I know that intellectually, she said softly. But emotionally, it still feels like I should have fought harder, said more, done something different. Before Anthony could respond, there was a knock at the door. Dr. Chen entered with another woman, tall, with silver-streaked black hair and an air of authority that suggested senior management. Mrs. Wilson, Dr. Wilson, Dr. Chen greeted them. This is Dr. Isabel Rivera, Chief of Obstetrics. Anthony stood to shake her hand, immediately recognizing the name. Dr. Rivera's research on maternal mortality disparities had been groundbreaking. Her papers were required reading at Memorial. Dr. Rivera, he acknowledged. I'm familiar with your work. And I've just become familiar with your situation, she replied, her expression grave. Dr. Chen has briefed me on what transpired with Dr. Fleming today, and I wanted to speak with you personally. She turned to Amira. First, Mrs. Wilson, let me apologize on behalf of this hospital for the care you received. It was unacceptable and does not reflect our standards. Amira nodded, surprised by the forthright acknowledgement. Second, Dr. Rivera continued, I want to assure you that Dr. Fleming will not be involved in your care moving forward. Dr. Chen will be your attending physician for the duration of your stay. Thank you, Amira said quietly. Dr. Rivera glanced at a tablet in her hands. I've reviewed your test results. The protein in your urine and your blood pressure readings are indeed concerning. We'll be monitoring you closely and may need to start you on magnesium sulfate to prevent seizures, as Dr. Fleming mentioned. She looked up, her gaze direct. The goal is to manage your condition and keep your baby in utero as long as safely possible. However, you should be prepared for the possibility of early delivery if your condition worsens. How early are we talking? Anthony asked. You're at 32 weeks now, Dr. Chen interjected. Every day makes a difference, but babies born at this stage generally do very well with proper neonatal care. Our NICU team is excellent. Dr. Rivera nodded in agreement. Let's focus on stabilizing your condition first. We'll do another comprehensive evaluation in the morning and make decisions. From there, she hesitated, then added, Now, about what happened today with Dr. Fleming. I understand you intend to file a formal complaint. Anthony straightened his shoulders. Yes, we do. Good, Dr. Rivera said firmly, surprising them both. I would like to speak with you about that privately, if I may. Anthony glanced at Amira, who nodded. Go ahead. I'm not going anywhere, she said with a small smile. We'll get you hooked up to the monitors first, Dr. Chen said, gesturing to a nurse who had entered with equipment. Then Dr. Rivera and your husband can talk while we get you comfortable. 20 minutes later, with Amira settled and connected to monitors displaying her vital signs and the baby's heart rate, Anthony followed Dr. Rivera to a small conference room down the hall. Please have a seat, she said, closing the door behind them. Anthony sat across from her, noticing the tension in her posture despite her professional demeanor. I'm going to be very direct with you, Dr. Wilson, she began. What happened to your wife today is not an isolated incident. Anthony nodded, unsurprised after Rita's comments. The nurse implied as much. Rita Gonzalez, Dr. Rivera said with a knowing nod. She's one of our best, and she's been trying to call attention to Dr. Fleming's behavior for years. Years? Anthony repeated, his anger rekindling. Yes, Dr. Rivera confirmed, her expression grim. Dr. Fleming has been with this hospital for nearly 3 decades. He's well connected, brings in wealthy patients, and sits on several influential committees. Until recently, he was practically untouchable. Until recently, Anthony noted. What changed? Dr. Rivera leaned forward slightly. I did. I became chief of obstetrics 6 months ago, and I've been quietly building a case. Your wife's experience today could be the tipping point we need. She pulled out a folder from her bag and placed it on the table between them. This contains data I've been collecting on patient outcomes under Dr. Fleming's care, broken down by race and socioeconomic factors. The disparities are significant. Anthony opened the folder, scanning the graphs and charts inside. His medical training allowed him to quickly grasp the implications. Higher rates of complications, longer wait times, fewer tests ordered, and less time spent with certain patient demographics. This is damning, he said quietly. Yes, but not quite damning enough, legally speaking, Dr. Rivera replied. Statistical evidence can be explained away or attributed to other factors. What we need are specific incidents, documented complaints, witness statements, the kind of evidence that can't be dismissed as coincidental. Like what happened to Amira today, Anthony said, understanding dawning. Exactly. You're both healthcare professionals. You understand medical protocols and can articulate exactly how they were violated. You witnessed unprofessional conduct firsthand. And importantly, you have the resources and knowledge to pursue this through the proper channels. Anthony studied Dr. Rivera's face. Why are you telling me this? Aren't you putting yourself at risk? She smiled thinly. Because I became a doctor, to help people, not to protect those who harm them. And because the maternal mortality rate for black women in this country is still more than 3 times that of white women. That's not just a statistic to me, it's a moral crisis. She tapped the folder. I've been building this case carefully, but I need allies. Specifically, I need someone like you, respected in your field, connected at another major hospital, and personally affected by the issue. You're asking me to be the face of this complaint, Anthony realized. Yes, she admitted frankly. The hospital administration is more likely to take action if the complaint comes from another physician, especially one with your credentials. It's not fair, but it's reality. Anthony considered her words, turning the folder's pages slowly. The data told a clear story of systemic bias affecting real patients, mothers and babies whose care had been compromised by one doctor's prejudice. I'm willing to take this on, he said finally. But I want to be clear about something. This isn't just about Dr. Fleming. One biased doctor is a problem, but a system that protects him is a crisis. Dr. Rivera nodded. I couldn't agree more. That's why I'm proposing a 2-pronged approach. First, we address Dr. Fleming's specific misconduct through formal complaints to the hospital board and potentially the state medical board. Second, we use this case to push for systemic changes in how we evaluate patient care and respond to complaints. What kind of changes? Mandatory collection and review of patient outcome data sorted by demographics, anonymous reporting systems for patients and staff, regular cultural competency training for all medical personnel, and most importantly, accountability metrics tied to departmental funding and physician evaluations. Anthony was impressed. You've given this a lot of thought. I've been working on this plan since before I took this position, she confirmed. But I needed the right case and the right allies to move forward. She pulled another document from her bag, a formal complaint form already partially filled out. If you're willing, I'd like you and your wife to document everything that happened today while it's still fresh. Every comment, every dismissal, every protocol violation. Be as specific as possible. Anthony took the form, scanning its contents. We'll do it, and I'll reach out to colleagues at Memorial who might be willing to help. The ethics committee I serve on has been working on similar initiatives. Perfect, Dr. Rivera said, visible relief in her expression. This won't be easy. Dr. Fleming has friends in high places, and change is always resisted, especially when it challenges power structures. We're prepared for that, Anthony assured her. This isn't just about Amira anymore. It's about every patient who deserves equal care regardless of their race or background. Dr. Rivera extended her hand across the table. Then I think we have the beginning of a partnership, Dr. Wilson. As they shook hands, a knock at the door interrupted them. A nurse poked her head in, her expression urgent. Dr. Rivera, Mrs. Wilson's blood pressure has spiked to 160/95. Dr. Chen asked me to find you immediately. Both doctors were on their feet instantly, all thoughts of complaints and systemic change momentarily set aside in favor of the immediate crisis. I'll meet you there, Dr. Rivera told the nurse, who nodded and hurried away. She turned to Anthony, whose face had gone pale with worry. This is why we monitor closely. Let's go see to your wife. They rushed back to Amira's room where Dr. Chen was already adjusting medication dosages, while a nurse helped Amira into a more comfortable position. What's happening? Anthony asked, moving immediately to Amira's side. Her pressure spiked suddenly, Dr. Chen explained, her manner calm but focused. We're starting magnesium sulfate now to prevent seizures and giving medication to try to bring the pressure down. Amira looked frightened but composed, squeezing Anthony's hand when he took hers. The baby? She asked. Dr. Rivera checked the fetal monitor. Heart rate is stable. Your little one is handling this well so far. If we can't get your blood pressure stabilized quickly, we may need to consider delivery, Dr. Chen added gently. I've already alerted the NICU team to be on standby just in case. Anthony felt a surge of emotion, fear for his wife and child, gratitude for the competent care they were now receiving, and renewed determination about the complaint they would file. If Dr. Fleming had taken Amira's symptoms seriously from the beginning, would they be in this crisis now? Dr. Rivera seemed to read his thoughts. "We caught this in time," she assured him quietly. "That's what matters now." For the next hour, the room was a flurry of activity as nurses came and went. Vital signs were monitored, and medications were adjusted. Gradually, Amira's blood pressure began to respond, edging down to less dangerous levels. 45 and 90, the nurse announced after the latest reading. Still elevated but moving in the right direction. Dr. Chen nodded, satisfied. "Let's continue the current regimen and monitor closely. I want readings every 15 minutes for the next 2 hours. Then we'll reassess." As the immediate crisis eased, Dr. Rivera pulled Anthony aside. "I need to check on other patients, but I'll be back later. In the meantime," she pressed a business card into his hand. "My personal cell is on the back. Call me directly if anything changes or if you need to talk further about our other discussion." Anthony nodded, tucking the card into his pocket. "Thank you for everything." After Dr. Rivera left, Anthony returned to Amira's bedside, pulling a chair close to hold her hand. "Some anniversary this turned out to be," Amira said weakly, attempting a smile. Anthony looked confused for a moment, then realization dawned. "Our first date. 12 years ago today." She nodded. "You took me to that terrible poetry reading, remember? The guy who kept comparing his ex-girlfriend to various kitchen appliances." Despite the stress of the situation, Anthony chuckled. "And you still agreed to a second date. I never understood why. Because when that woman in the audience stood up and called him out for being sexist, you were the only other man in the room who applauded her," Amira said softly. "I knew then that you were different, that you'd stand up for what's right even when it's uncomfortable." Anthony brought her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "I'd stand up for you anywhere, anytime, but what happened today, it's bigger than us now." "I know," Amira replied, her eyes serious. "Dr. Rivera told me a little before you went to talk with her. This could help a lot of women, couldn't it?" "It could," Anthony agreed. "If we're willing to push for real change." Amira's free hand moved to her belly, where their child kicked as if in response. "Then we push," she said simply. "For every mother who wasn't taken seriously. For every patient who was dismissed because of how they look or where they come from. And for our baby, who deserves to grow up in a world where everyone receives equal care and respect." Anthony nodded, a sense of purpose settling over him. The day had taken an unexpected turn, from a routine prenatal appointment to a medical emergency, to the beginning of what might become a significant challenge to the status quo. But as he sat with his wife, watching the reassuring rhythm of their baby's heartbeat on the monitor, he knew they were equal to the task ahead. What Dr. Fleming had intended as dismissal had instead become the catalyst for something much more powerful: change. 3 months had passed since that fateful day at Downtown Medical Center. The nursery, painted a soft sage green, was bathed in morning sunlight as Amira gently rocked baby Zara in the handcrafted chair Anthony's parents had given them. At 6 weeks old, Zara was thriving, alert, gaining weight steadily, and already showing signs of her mother's determination in the way she focused intently on faces and sounds. "She's going to be a scientist like her mom," Anthony said from the doorway, smiling at the peaceful scene. "Or a surgeon like her dad," Amira replied, looking up with a tired but content smile. "Though I'm hoping she sleeps through the night before she chooses a career." Anthony laughed softly, crossing the room to kneel beside them. "How was she last night?" "Up at midnight and 3, but she went back down pretty easily." Amira stroked the baby's cheek with a gentle finger. "Dr. Chen says it's all normal. We got the all clear at yesterday's checkup." "Speaking of doctors," Anthony said, his tone shifting slightly, "I got a call from Dr. Rivera this morning. The hospital board meeting is scheduled for tomorrow." Amira's expression grew more serious. "Are they finally going to address the complaint?" "That's what she said. 3 months of gathering statements, reviewing records, and building the case. Tomorrow is when they present their findings and recommendations." Amira looked down at their daughter, sleeping peacefully against her chest. "Do they still want us there?" Anthony nodded. Dr. Rivera thinks our presence will make it harder for them to minimize the issue. Several other former patients are coming too, women who came forward after hearing about our complaint. In the weeks following Amira's hospitalization, the situation had evolved in ways they hadn't anticipated. What began as a complaint against one doctor had grown into a broader examination of patterns of care throughout the hospital. Rita, true to her word, had helped connect them with other nurses who had witnessed similar incidents. Those nurses, in turn, had reached out to former patients who might be willing to share their experiences. The response had been overwhelming. Women from across the city, most of them Black or Hispanic, had come forward with stories that echoed Amira's. Symptoms dismissed, concerns belittled, complications that could have been prevented if they'd been taken seriously earlier. "Is your mom still okay to watch Zara?" Amira asked. "Already confirmed." "She'll be here at 8, Anthony replied. "Are you sure you're up for this? You could always submit your statement in writing." Amira shook her head firmly. "No, I need to be there. Not just for myself, but for all the women who can't be. Those who didn't have a doctor husband to advocate for them, or who are too afraid of retaliation, or who simply weren't believed until it was too late." She looked down at Zara again, her expression softening. "Besides, this little one is the reason we're doing this. So she grows up in a world where she's taken seriously when she speaks up." Anthony kissed Amira's forehead, then placed another, gentle kiss on their daughter's head. "Then we'll be there together, as a family." The next morning arrived with a nervous energy in the Wilson household. Anthony's mother arrived early, cooing over her granddaughter and shooing the parents out. The door with assurances that everything would be fine. "You go change that hospital," she told them firmly. "My grandbaby deserves better than what you went through, Amira." The drive to downtown medical center was quiet, both of them lost in their own thoughts. Amira wore a simple but elegant navy dress that projected confidence and professionalism. Anthony was in a suit, his hospital ID still clipped to his pocket out of habit. They met Dr. Rivera in the lobby, where she was already waiting with a group of women, former patients who had agreed to testify about their experiences. "Thank you all for coming," she greeted them. "The board is assembling in the main conference room. We'll be called in shortly." One of the women, her newborn cradled against her chest in a wrap, approached Amira. "I just wanted to thank you," she said quietly. "After what happened with my first baby, I was too scared to speak up. I blamed myself. Thought maybe I just wasn't explaining my symptoms clearly enough." Amira recognized her story, a young mother, whose postpartum bleeding had been dismissed as normal until she collapsed from blood loss at home, barely surviving. "You're not alone," Amira assured her, reaching out to squeeze her hand. "That's why we're all here today." A hospital administrator appeared at the conference room door, gesturing for them to enter. The large room was arranged formally, with the hospital board, 12 men and women in business attire, seated at a long table at the front. Rows of chairs faced them, already partially filled with hospital staff and department heads. Dr. Fleming was present, sitting rigidly in the front row beside a man in an expensive suit who appeared to be his attorney. He didn't turn as they entered, but his shoulders tensed visibly. Dr. Rivera led their group to the reserved seats near the front. As they settled in, the board chairwoman, a stern-looking woman in her 60s, called the meeting to order. "We're here today to address formal complaints filed against Dr. Richard Fleming and to consider the systemic recommendations presented by Dr. Isabel Rivera, Chief of Obstetrics," she began. "This is not a trial but an internal review process aimed at ensuring our hospital maintains the highest standards of patient care." She looked directly at Dr. Fleming. "Dr. Fleming has been given the opportunity to respond to these complaints in writing, and his response has been included in the materials before the board. His attorney is present today as an observer only." The chairwoman turned to Dr. Rivera. "Dr. Rivera, please present your findings." Dr. Rivera approached the podium, tablet in hand. "Thank you, Chairwoman Davis. Over the past 3 months, my team has conducted a thorough review of patient outcomes under Dr. Fleming's care, compared with those of other obstetric providers in our hospital. We've also collected testimonials from patients and staff regarding specific incidents of concern. She tapped her tablet, and graphs appeared on the large screen behind her. The same data she'd shown Anthony months before, now expanded and more detailed. These findings indicate statistically significant disparities in the care provided to patients based on race and socioeconomic factors, she explained, walking the board through the numbers methodically. Black and Hispanic patients were 64% less likely to receive comprehensive testing when presenting with symptoms of preeclampsia, despite having higher risk factors. They experienced wait times averaging 47 minutes longer than white patients with similar insurance coverage. And perhaps most concerning, the rate of preventable complications was 3.2 times higher among minority patients under Dr. Fleming's care. The room was silent as she presented, the data speaking volumes on its own. Dr. Fleming's attorney scribbled notes furiously, while Dr. Fleming himself stared straight ahead, his expression unreadable. Beyond the statistical evidence, Dr. Rivera continued, we've collected first-hand accounts from patients and staff that suggest a pattern of dismissive behavior, inappropriate comments, and clinical decisions that fell below our standard of care. Today, we have several of these patients here to share their experiences directly. One by one, the women stood to tell their stories. A teacher whose severe pain was dismissed as normal cramping until an emergency ultrasound revealed a ruptured ectopic pregnancy. A social worker whose twins were born prematurely after her. Symptoms of preterm labor were ignored during 2 consecutive appointments. A nurse from another hospital whose requests for genetic testing were denied despite a strong family history of birth defects. Each story was unique, yet the pattern was unmistakable. Women who felt unheard, disrespected, and endangered by the very person entrusted with their care. When it was Amira's turn, she handed Zara's photo to Anthony and approached the podium with steady steps. My name is Dr. Amira Wilson, she began, her voice clear and strong. I hold a PhD in biochemistry and teach at the university. 3 months ago, I came to this hospital as a patient, 8 months pregnant with my first child and experiencing symptoms that concerned me. She recounted the appointment in detail, the long wait, Dr. Fleming's dismissive attitude, the comments about her people and her community, the refusal to run tests that would have immediately identified her preeclampsia. If my husband hadn't arrived when he did, if he hadn't been a physician who could speak the same medical language as Dr. Fleming, I might not be standing here today. My daughter might not have survived. That reality haunts me, but it also compels me to be here, because for every woman like me who has a partner able to advocate for her, there are dozens who don't. She looked directly at the board members, making eye contact with each one. This isn't about one bad day or one difficult doctor-patient interaction. This is about a pattern of behavior that puts lives at risk and violates the fundamental principle of medicine. Do no harm. As Amira returned to her seat, the chairwoman thanked her for her testimony. Dr. Fleming, would you like to address the board at this time? Dr. Fleming stood, straightening his tie nervously. I've served this hospital faithfully for 30 years, he began, his voice tight. During that time, I've delivered over 5,000 babies safely. I've been a pioneer in advanced obstetric techniques and have trained dozens of younger physicians who now practice throughout the country. He glanced back at his attorney before continuing. I categorically deny any accusation of bias in my practice. Medicine is not an exact science. Clinical decisions are made based on symptoms, medical history, and the doctor's professional judgment, not on a patient's race or background. His gaze swept over the women who had testified. I'm sorry if any patient felt their concerns weren't adequately addressed, but I stand by my clinical decisions. What's happening here is a dangerous precedent, allowing subjective feelings and statistical manipulations to override a physician's trained judgment. The room remained silent as he sat down, his face flushed. Dr. Rivera approached the podium again. Chairwoman Davis, members of the board, I'd like to present our recommendations based on these findings. She outlined a comprehensive plan. Mandatory, bias training for all clinical staff. An anonymous reporting system for patients and employees. quarterly reviews of patient outcomes sorted by demographic data, the formation of a patient advocacy committee that would include community representatives, and most significantly, the implementation of accountability metrics that would affect departmental funding and physician evaluations. As for Dr. Fleming specifically, she concluded, I leave that determination to the board. However, I would emphasize that addressing individual behavior without systemic change would be insufficient. We have an opportunity here to transform how we deliver care to all patients regardless of their background. The chairwoman thanked Dr. Rivera and announced that the board would deliberate privately before sharing their decision. We'll reconvene in 1 hour, she said, dismissing the room. In the hospital cafeteria, Anthony and Amira sat with Dr. Rivera and the other patients, the tension of the morning giving way to a sense of cautious solidarity. No matter what they decide, one woman said, bouncing her fussy infant gently, at least we spoke our truth. They can't unhear what we said today. Amira nodded, thinking of Zara at home with her grandmother. That's what matters most, that we used our voices. Not just for ourselves, but for every woman who will walk through those doors in the future. When they returned to the conference room an hour later, the atmosphere was solemn. Dr. Fleming and his attorney were already seated, their expressions giving nothing away. Chairwoman Davis called the meeting back to order. After careful consideration of the evidence presented, the board has reached the following decisions. The room grew perfectly still as she continued. Regarding Dr. Richard Fleming, the board finds sufficient cause for concern to warrant immediate action. Dr. Fleming will be placed on administrative leave pending completion of a comprehensive review by an external committee. During this period, he will not be permitted to see patients or participate in hospital operations. Dr. Fleming's face reddened, but he remained silent as his attorney whispered something in his ear. Furthermore, the chairwoman continued, the board unanimously approves the systemic changes proposed by Dr. Rivera. We recognize that addressing individual behavior alone is insufficient. Therefore, we are establishing a task force on equitable care to be chaired jointly by Dr. Rivera and Mrs. Wilson, tasked with implementing these recommendations across all departments. Amira's eyes widened in surprise. She hadn't expected to be named in an official capacity. The board acknowledges that these changes will require significant resources and ongoing commitment, Chairwoman Davis concluded. To that end, we are allocating initial funding of $1 million to support this initiative, with the expectation of additional investment as the program develops. She looked around the room, her expression grave but determined. What we heard today was difficult but necessary. As healthcare providers, we have a sacred obligation to care for all patients with equal diligence and respect. When we fall short of that obligation, we must have the courage to acknowledge it and the wisdom to change. This board is committed to that change, starting today. As the meeting adjourned, Dr. Rivera turned to Amira with a smile. Co-chair, huh? Are you up for it? Amira looked at Anthony, who nodded encouragingly. Absolutely, she replied, though I might need some flexibility for middle-of-the-night feedings. We'll make it work, Dr. Rivera assured her. What happened to you was terrible, but what's coming from it could transform this hospital. Sometimes it takes one person standing up to change everything. Not one person, Amira corrected her, looking around at the group of women who had shared their stories. All of us together. 6 months later, Amira stood at a podium again, this time in the hospital's main auditorium. Behind her, a banner proclaimed the official launch of the Equitable Care Initiative. The room was filled with medical staff, community members, and reporters from local news outlets. Today marks not an ending, but a beginning, she told the audience. 6 months ago, I came to this hospital as a frightened patient and left determined to make a difference. Thanks to the courage of many women who shared their stories, the dedication of staff like Dr. Rivera who refused to accept the status quo, and the commitment of hospital leadership to meaningful change, that difference is becoming reality. She gestured to the presentation screen, which displayed the initiative's key components. The new patient advocacy office staffed by community representatives, the anonymous reporting system already being used by patients and staff, the revamped training program for all clinical personnel, and most importantly, the preliminary data showing improvements in patient satisfaction and outcomes across all demographic groups. This isn't just about statistics or policies, Amira continued. It's about people, mothers, babies, families whose lives depend on the care they receive here. It's about creating a culture where every patient is heard, respected, and treated according to the same high standard, regardless of their race, background, or zip code. In the front row, Anthony sat with Zara, now 9 months old, perched on his lap. She babbled happily, unaware of her role in the story that had brought them all to this moment. "My daughter will grow up in a world that's still imperfect," Amira acknowledged, smiling at Zara. "But thanks to what we've started here, it's a world with one more institution committed to treating her with the dignity and respect she deserves. Not because of who her parents are or what degrees they hold, but simply because she is a human being worthy of care." As applause filled the room, Amira stepped away from the podium to join her family. Anthony squeezed her hand proudly as Zara reached for her mother with a delighted giggle. What had begun as one doctor's prejudice had transformed into a movement for change. It wasn't perfect, there would be resistance, setbacks, and challenges ahead, but the path forward was clear. And for the Wilson family, that made all the difference in the world.